reading so much lately because I'm in isolation that I already have so much content to make another one for you. So I think I'll keep doing these probably once a month until I'm not reading as much, and then I'll probably make it once every few months. So yes, if you enjoy this, definitely subscribe because I will definitely be making more of them. So let's get right into it. Firstly, I don't have the physical books for these because, as I've mentioned in previous videos, my eyes suddenly, all of a sudden, I need reading glasses, and they're taking a few weeks to get to me, and so I've had to listen to all of these books. A couple of them I did read on my Kindle, and that's how I figured out that I needed reading glasses because my eyes hurt so much from reading them. So I've had to listen to books this whole month, which has been really hard because I like to mix it up. I usually only listen to non-fiction, but I've had to listen to fictional books, and yeah, usually I would like to have a bit more of a mix in there, but anyway, I've had no choice, right? So my point is that I don't have the books to show you and to tap on and all of that, but hopefully for next month's, because I'll be so sick of listening to books, I'll be reading a lot of physical books, so hopefully I'll have a lot of physical books for next month. Okay, so the first book, I'll get my Goodreads account up. So since the books that we already spoke about last time, and if you want to check out that video, you should watch that after this one. But since the last one on that list, okay, so I did mention last time that I was listening to Crushing It by Vaynerchuk. By the way, most of these are fiction, except for this one and another one. There's about 7 books, by the way. I'm going to go into about 7 books. I have actually read 8, and I read one of them twice, so it's actually technically 9. But let's see how long this takes, and I think I might leave the last one to do in next month so that I can just do what I read in August and then what I read in September, perhaps, even though I really want to talk about that book because I loved it so much, but we'll see. Okay, so I read Crushing It by GaryVee. If you don't know, GaryVee is a social media expert and person, like a social media figure, and he has he works in business and that's his field, but he's really incredible at seeing patterns in social media and then kind of predicting what's going to happen, and also in branding and how to use social media. So I have to say that I know that people can really either love him or hate him, but I have to admit that I really love what he's about, even if I don't agree with everything that he says or stands for. But I think that he actually really is totally living in his purpose and truth. I think it's fucking amazing. I think he's actually very, very inspiring, and yeah, so when I do listen to him or watch his videos or anything, it's not all the time. I go through phases. Last year I went through a phase of really watching a lot of his content and getting a lot out of it. And now listening to this book, it was great. It was really, really great. I loved that he narrated it himself, and also it actually really motivated me to start this channel. So I have to say that I have to give credit to that because he talks so much about just getting out there, doing it, making the content. Don't worry if you're not good, just start and you're gonna figure it out. Give yourself time, be patient, and just keep going. You never know what's gonna work, so try things. He's really about that, and that really did motivate me. Okay, that's it. What am I holding myself back for? Okay, sorry, my iPhone just randomly stopped recording, and also I realized I had my headphones in for absolutely no reason, and that just shows how much I am constantly listening to issue for sure. But because I'm in ISO at the moment, I'm just like, okay, it's okay. As long as I'm getting other stuff done too. So anyway, back to it. Yes, so this book, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And by the way, if you have Goodreads, you should add me on there. I'll share a link in the bio. I guess it's just my name, Naomi Batiste. So yes, I do recommend this book to you if you have any interest in creating any content, like whether it is YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, I don't know, anything. I will say, however, that this book came out in 2018, I think, so that a lot of the stuff is really outdated in it, a lot of the advice, but to be fair, I went into it knowing that, but still wanting to read it because I just like, I do really like Gary, and also it just kind of, he's really hype man, like he does hype you up, and yeah, I just kind of wanted that from him. And to be fair, I did get it because look, I started this channel and I've been creating and I've been on the momentum, and I really do have to credit that to listening to this book. So the next book, I'll go back to my Goodreads. Okay, the next book is one that I have actually mentioned in another video, so I'm not going to spend too long on it. So this book is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and it's written by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Okay, so this book, firstly, I'd seen it on a lot of recommendations on, like TikTok and Goodreads and things like that, especially in, queer recommendation lists, and I was really confused because I was like, 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, like, it doesn't sound like a queer book. Last year, I read another book by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Okay, so I actually physically read this book on my Kindle. Last year I listened to a book of hers, and it's called Daisy Jones and the Six. And to be honest, I didn't really love that book. However, a lot of people do. Like, it's very highly rated and recommended, but I didn't really connect with it. I didn't really enjoy it, even though, the way that it was narrated was brilliant, I thought, because the whole book is dialogue from interviews, and not literally like it's all acted out, but it has so many different narrators that it does, give personality to each of the characters, which was really well done, but I still just thought it was meh. Didn't really like it. So anyway, I went into this being like, okay, a bit biased, because I already not a huge fan of the author's work just from reading one book, so, gotta give it a go. And I have to say that I did adore the storyline in this book, especially because, it's very relatable to me being a woman-loving woman, so I thought that it was actually a very brilliant story, and the characters were very complex. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It sort of lost a point for me because I didn't think that the writing was really that amazing, as I said in my last video when I did briefly talk about it. It wasn't that amazing, so I was like, okay, like, this isn't like a favorite book. I didn't love it, but I mean, I did love it. The thing is, I did love it. 4 is still a good rating, but I felt like there was a bit of biphobia in the book as well, from one of the characters, which to be totally fair, like, this is set in the 60s, I think, mostly. So of course, 60s, 70s and 80s maybe. Anyway, long time ago. So of course, bisexuality was very misunderstood. I don't even think people really had that term for it yet. It wasn't widely known and understood. So that is so fair. But you know, it was hard reading one of the characters being quite biphobic, and I think that those themes are important. But what troubled me a little bit was knowing that the author is a cis het woman, so she's heterosexual herself. She's not queer. That was a bit cringy for me personally, although I would love to discuss that with anyone, because you know what I'm saying about this isn't definitely true. I mean, the author might have a lot to say about that, and its importance in the book. Maybe that was just really important for that character at that time. So anyway, it's just that I have read a few other books which I'll mention where there have been protagonists who are bisexual, and this biphobia hasn't come up from their love interest, which was like such a breath of fresh air to read, because it's like, you know, it's like you want to read queer stories but you don't really want to be like re-traumatized or anything. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that. I definitely recommend this book, especially if you are a woman-loving woman, or you know, whatever gender. But I just think that especially that's what I liked most about it, was that I could relate to that aspect of it. But I did think that there was some twists and turns, but to be fair, I think that I did guess at most of the things that were about to happen. I don't think that there was one thing that did take me by surprise, which I enjoyed. But you know, most of it was quite predictable to me. However, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, I read this book in 24 hours. Like, I devoured it. It's a very, very easy read. Okay then, well, I think I will move on to the next book. Okay, so the next book I read, which this is a book that I listened to. I downloaded it a while ago, like months ago. I thought it'd be a good like bedtime read. Started it and didn't really get into it, but I'm glad I waited, because I did really get into it months later when I finally read it. So this one is called They Both Die at the End. They Both Die at the End. And it is by Adam Silvera. So what attracted me to this book is that I love anything on the theme of death, or maybe not anything, but I'm very drawn to that theme. It's something that I've been studying as much as you can study death. The unknown, you know, very hard to study, but you know, exploring just death in general. So I actually have a shelf, so you can create shelves on Goodreads, and I have a shelf dedicated to death, and I've got like 10 or 15 books or something on there, and I've got like maybe 10 or 15 shelves in and of themselves, but just within death I've got like so many books in there that I either have read or want to read. They're all more non-fiction, but anyway, this one is a fictional book. It is actually YA, which I do not normally read. I'm not into YA, which means young adult, by the way, because the main characters in this are teenagers, albeit they are like, I think 18, 19, something like that. They are like, you know, they're older teenagers, but they're still teenagers. It's still YA. But you know, I wanted to give it a go because it was, you know, about death, and also it is a queer book as well. I'm really trying to read a lot more queer fiction, because God, I've read that many books that are, you know, hetero, so I may as well hear more queer stories and voices, so really trying to focus on that. So I actually forgot it was queer though when I started to read it, and I hate that I'm telling you that, but to be fair, it is like, it's not a secret. I just forgot, because it did take me so long to finally I think I probably found it on queer recommendation TikToks, things like that, and forgotten. Anyway, I was like very, very, very pleasantly surprised by that queer theme within it. So, okay, the premise of this book. Do you know what? I didn't tell you this premise of Evelyn Hugo either. God. I need to get better at this because every video I've done, I keep just telling you what I thought of the book and I don't tell you anything about it. So it's like, how do you know whether you want to read it or not? So I'll try and say what the book is about and then what I thought of it. So, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. What that's actually about is it's about a woman called Evelyn Hugo. So it's set both between the present day, Evelyn's telling her story. And so we're going back to, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever years it's set. But she's telling the story in the present day of, 2018 or, something around about that. So, Evelyn Hugo was like absolute film star. Like she, especially in like the 60s and whatever years those were, she was like the film star, like the most famous woman. Like, I don't think that her character is anything like Audrey Hepburn, but in my mind I related to like Catherine Hepburn, like Audrey Hepburn, like those kind of people, how they were like absolute film stars, like angelic, like people that worshipped and adored them, and they were like the most beautiful women in the world and everyone wanted to be them. So that's what I kind of related to in my head. So she's like that famous, and she's been married 7 times and she's never talked to the press or anything about her story, about all of these marriages. There's obviously been all of this like gossip in the press and in magazines and things, but she's never like laid out her truth. And so in this book, that's what she's really doing. She's finally giving her story, and I actually want to read out a quote. Okay, so this quote. So she's responding to a question that is irrelevant. So she says, "No," she told me, "because they are just husbands. I am Evelyn Hugo. And anyway, I think once people know the truth, they will be much more interested in my wife." So, that is what Evelyn Hugo is about without me spoiling anything else. So now back to they both die at the end. They both die at the end, they both die at the end. The premise of this book is that this is in a sort of like dystopian reality. Perhaps it is the future. I don't know. I don't know if they actually tell you what year it is, but anyway, it's a dystopian sort of reality where there is this service called Deathcast. And Deathcast, if you are dying in the next 24 hours, all these people who work at Deathcast, they call all the people who are going to die in that 24 hours, and they call and they say, at some point today, it is your last day. So people, they get the call and then they, say goodbye and they make the most of it and whatever. So, there are, you do actually meet a number of characters in this who are going to die that day or not die that day, but are involved somehow. They work with Deathcast, something like that. But the main 2 characters that it really goes back and forth between their minds are, two young boys who are in their late teens, and yeah, it's fantastic. Like I love that that they both die at the end. That it's their last day, but you're still very drawn into like, how's it gonna happen? What's gonna happen? What is going on? Like it's still somehow like able to really draw you into the story. So I thought that was like a really interesting premise, and it took me probably a few chapters to get into it, but I eventually fell in love with the characters. I really, really loved the characters and their connection, And by the end of the book, even though I knew what was going to happen at the end, I was devastated. It's like one of those books where I was thinking about it the whole next day, which I love. I love when a book affects me that much. And I still have an affection towards these characters. I could probably even listen to it again. I know if I was a teenager and I read this book, I would be listening to it again and again and again, or reading it again. Like, it would be my favorite book. But the thing is, like, I'm 30 years old, so if this was about adults and they were 30, like, yeah, I would love it. But also, it is written like a YA book. Like, it is written very simply, but effectively, to like really get things going. A lot of momentum, the pacing's great, everything like that. But I personally, I guess I'm into something maybe a bit more complex, but I highly recommend it. It's amazing. Like, if you are in your early 20s or a teenager, oh my god, I want to get this for all of my nieces and nephews. Like, it is amazing. It is a really good book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah, just genuinely glad that books like this are out there for teenagers and young people. Like, I'm just so glad that there are, around these themes of death and friendship and queerness. I won't really give anything away, but like, just the concept within this book, I think it's fantastic. Like, when I was a teenager, I was just reading Harry Potter, and like, technically there are no queer people in Harry Potter. Like, I know that Dumbledore's like queer coded, and Jacob Rowling has said in interviews that he's queer, but like, she never says it in the books, which is like a bit fucking lame, I reckon. So anyway, loved that. The next book. I listened to this one as well, because the book that's after this one, I tried to start reading, but my eyes were really hurting. So after reading Evelyn and Hugo on my Kindle, that's when it all went downhill with my eyes. And I started reading this other one that's after this one, and I had to just listen. So I had downloaded this book again months ago, and tried to listen to it and couldn't. So it's funny, I'm just in a book reading mode now where I'm very open to like absorbing fiction, and at other times in my life where I'm very extroverted, I just can't absorb it, I can't get into it. So at the moment I'm the opposite. I'm like really, really enjoying it and absorbing it all, and I love being in that place. I mean, I love both of them. I wouldn't want to be in either forever. So this book is called Writers and Lovers. So this book is about a woman in her early 30s who, she's had a bit of a bad run with relationships, and she is a writer, very much a struggling writer, because she has not been published yet, and she's got a lot of debt, student debt. She lives in the US, and so she's working in hospitality, and she's dating, and so the story really follows her through her life, through the mundane, through her relationships, and I loved it. So much. I felt like I could actually really resonate with her, in like her age and her anxieties around that, like her financial stress and debt, and like just feelings of insecurity and inadequacy. Like, I don't feel like that all the time, but especially since getting older, it's like something that is nagging at me. And so through her sort of thoughts and feelings, I could really see myself in them, and so I was very invested in her journey, in her as a character, and like what was happening to her. And in saying that, the other characters in this book were very nuanced. Like, I really, really enjoyed that. Usually in a book, like, or I know whether I like a character or not. Like, I'll just be like, oh, I don't like this character, or I love this character. But they were so nuance in this book that, you know, they would say something and I would question their character, and then they would do something and I'd be like, okay, actually, you know, and it was just so like you were constantly trying to figure them out, which is brilliant. I love that. There was nothing obvious about these characters. And so, yeah, I just really felt like I was just very invested in what was happening between these characters. And even though it's not much of a plot, but it's one of those stories that is really carried along by the characters and their development and their connection, the dialogue. So I adored it. Like, I really, really loved it. It did take me a bit to get into, and for that reason I gave it 4 out of 5. I think I've given all of these books 4 out of 5 so far. But I probably could give it 5. Like, I reckon I'll buy a hard copy and I'll read it, and then I'll decide whether it's 4 or 5, because sometimes with fiction, when I'm listening to it, I don't engage as much because I'm sort of like cleaning the house, going for walks. My mind is like in 2 places. Whereas when I'm sitting down and reading a book, my attention is totally on the book. I mean, of course, sometimes your attention kind of like goes elsewhere, but then you go back and read it again, right? And with listening, sometimes I can just not even realize that I'm zoning out and miss things, and I don't engage as fully and completely. So I reckon I will read this book physically, and then I'll see if it really is 4 stars or 5 stars, because that's very important to me, getting my ratings right. I take it very seriously, I do. It's quite pathetic, really, but I love it. Just one of those like pleasures, right? Like, just particular pleasures. Like, I'm such a laid back, phlegmatic person, but I love to check things off, and I love to, like, that's why I love Goodreads, because you can do a reading challenge and I check off each book, and it motivates me. Literally just checking them off motivates me to read an entire book. It's so bizarre, but I love it. Okay, so now getting to this next book that I did read on my Kindle. This book is called Rebecca. Quite a famous book, quite an old book. I think it's written in the 1930s. And the author is called, Daphne de Maurier. Let me just have a look at the spelling. Daphne de Maurier. God, I'm probably butchering that. If you just Google Rebecca by Daphne, it's 100% gonna come up, because it is an extremely well-known book. So, yeah, okay, I'll tell you what this book is about. It's about a young woman. I believe she's 21, but she's very, very young and innocent, like very naive. And she is working as I want to say like a woman's hand. Like, she just kind of follows around whoever her employer is and accompanies them places, and is just like a sort of person who comes around and does little jobs for them and entertains them, and like, just, yeah, a strange job that I guess doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, I guess for like wealthy women, they just like hire another woman, a younger woman, to accompany them places. And so she's doing that, and she accompanies awful woman. She's not a bad woman, but she's just like, just a bore. Anyway, she accompanies her to Monte Carlo in the south of France, I believe. And there she meets a wealthy older man, and this isn't a spoiler, by the way, this is on like the blurb of the book. This is the whole premise of the book, right? So she ends up marrying him and going back to his property, his mansion, which, as it turns out, is not literally haunted constant atmosphere about it that is just so unique. It's like spellbinding the whole way through. I loved the way it was written, and I loved how the author portrayed, the development of the protagonist, because you're in her mind the whole time. You're hearing her thoughts and fantasies, and in the start of the book, she's very, very like fantastical. Is constantly like, getting swept up in her own like fantasies, whether negative or positive, and so much of it is just like she's just like bleh, she's all over the place. And by the end of the book, it's like you can feel this like groundedness and strength. Anyway, and I'm not giving anything away by saying that, because the prologue, is her going back and telling the story to you, like she's reflecting on it. So it's like the end of the story is also at the beginning, so you can feel who the character is in that prologue, and then you feel that again in the end. And I thought, wow, that's incredible for a writer to be able to do that, for that character to totally change how she feels to you, how her mind feels. I thought that's just like brilliant to be able to portray that. So yeah, I loved it. The only thing I've heard from like other reviews is that people said that the start was boring. For me personally, I had no idea what was actually going to happen later on, so I was quite enjoying the start. I was enjoying it, but of course once it really gets into it, like it's fucking amazing and epic, and then I look back and I'm like, yeah, okay, nothing was really happening at the start, but obviously the scene needed to be set. Everything needed to fall into place before it could get crazy. So I would highly recommend Rebecca by Daphne. It is an absolutely brilliant book. Okay, so the next book that I listened to, now technically I listened to this years ago, but I finished it in the last weeks, because me and my ex-partner were listening to it together, and we listened to it on road trips and things like that, so we listened to most of it, and then there was like literally like a chapter left, and we've separated, so I was like, fuck this, I'm just gonna listen to the rest so that I can tick it off and be like, okay, I've read it now. So it is Outliers, the story of success. Outliers, the story of success, by Malcolm Gladwell. So this book is about people who have achieved success, and actually like analysing the data, I guess, on like what has set them apart, how they have gotten there, like from like Bill Gates and the Beatles, and it like gives a lot of examples, and not just individuals, but like how certain people in certain times and places and cultures and religions, and it's just actually very, very, very interesting. The biggest takeaway, and I think that this is something that people reference a lot, is that he really breaks down the idea of needing 10,000 hours in your field, or whatever it is, in your pursuit, to be a master of it. And so it's like a lot of these stories, you kind of find out how there was something that worked out for this person to be able to get these 10,000 hours up a lot more quickly than most people would be able to. And it kind of does show you that it's not necessarily how talented somebody is, whether they become successful. There's a lot of just circumstance involved, and getting those hours up, of course, like actually being able to do that though, like that really does depend on circumstance. So anyway, it's a fascinating book. It's really, really good. I definitely recommend it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I have a few other books by Malcolm Gladwell here in front of me. I've got Tipping Point and Blink, and I used to have another one called David and Goliath, but an ex-partner of mine gave it to their friend and I never got it back before I even read it. It was given to me anyway, so I mean it's fine. bunch of times. I'm just like, meh. But as I said, I end up loving it. So the premise of this is that the US when was their election? Was it 2018? 2016? They elected, and in this universe that is completely fictional, and I wish it was real, but instead of Donald Trump, it was a woman, a Texan woman, who has her ex-husband's Mexican, and so her 2 children are Mexican, biracial. So of course it's the first female US president, which in and of itself is like fucking awesome. So the book is based on her son, Alex Claremont Diaz, and as I said, he's biracial, Mexican, and Texan. It is about him and his relationship with Prince Henry, who is a Prince of Wales. So this is another queer fiction. I wouldn't call it YA, I don't think. It is, although it's verging on it, it's not. This is why I didn't initially read it, because I didn't think it was the kind of book that I would actually like. But I adored it. It is very different to books I normally read. But you know what? Like, I loved that about it. I thought, because it's such a fantasy, like, even just the political aspect of it is such a fantasy, let alone, like, this connection between the first son of the United States and the Prince of Wales, getting into a relationship and then, like, exploring that and seeing where that goes. It was all just, like, such a fantasy, such pure escapism, that I think that, of course, it would be something that I would be really into right now, because I'm in isolation. I'm not really like, we need a fucking fantasy right now. It's not literally the genre fantasy, but it's like, it is just pure escapism. And I loved it for that. I loved it for that so much. I loved the characters, and I loved the story. It surprised me so much. I went into it thinking that I only wanted to read it because I am reading so much trying to read a lot more queer fiction, and this is like gotta be the most popular like gay fiction at the moment. Like, it's insanely popular, so I just read it because I want to read what people are reading. Didn't expect to love it. I thought that I'd give it 3 or 4 stars, but by the end I gave it 5 stars. And the day I finished it in the morning, after like 2 days or something of listening, and then that evening I started it again, and then read it again. It's like a 12-hour listen, so not a super quick listen, so it took me another 2 days probably. And okay, this is bad, this shows where I'm at, but I listened to it twice, right? And then I went and bought the book, and now I'm like this far into it, and I'm reading it with my sore eyes, so I can't really read that much. I'm just reading like bits, and it's funny because I'm like taking notes, and it's not even the kind of book that you would normally take notes, like it's not like a literary book. But I have to say that even though usually a book would lose points for me for not being like super creatively written, like the prose not being like having any rhythm, this book it didn't lose a point, because it's very much about politics and people in the world of politics, so it made so much sense for it to be written in this way that I couldn't dare fault it for that. And there are parts where Prince Henry is actually very romantic in his writing, like as in like, philosophically romantic. He's very like floral, and I love that. So I love that there's like little bits in there that are a bit more creative, and it's like, okay, I know that the author can do that, but it makes sense that this would be written like very logical, and it's very like cosmopolitan, and they're very wealthy, but it's just fun. Like, it's really great, like escapism, as I've said a million times. But also I could even share with you a little quote that relates to this as just such a fairy tale. Most queer fiction is absolutely fucking tragic because of course like that's queer history, you know, but I guess the difference between this and Evelyn Hugo, as the other book I mentioned, they're both about people being in the public eye and not really being able to be openly gay. Both of those books, Evelyn Hugo, the woman loving woman focused one, and this one with the queer men, but the difference is that this one, Red, White and Royal Blue, is set in 2020. So I think that says a lot. I mean, even though this level of history isn't being made yet, but it could, it's possible now. Whereas like back where Evelyn Hugo is set, it was just not possible to be able to be, you know, have like any kind of positive outcome. So, yeah, so Prince Henry is talking about why he loves Return of the Jedi, Star Wars. He's talking about why he prefers that movie, and he says something like, the overall theme you're intended to take away is hope and love, and that's what it leaves you with a sense of most of all. And I underlined that because that's what I feel about this book. I went back and I looked at all of the books I've given 5 stars to. They're all fucking devastating, they're all tragic, they're all emotional, heart-wrenching books. Like, I love that shit. But this is such a happy, positive fairy tale story that I think it's nice. It's nice to have that, to give yourself that. And usually I can't even really connect with books like that, but this one I did. And I agree that, like, you know, the feeling you get to take away from this is hope and love. And that's fucking beautiful, right? And I think that, you know what? Queer people fucking deserve a fairy tale finally. I mean, how many do heteros get? Like, gay people need it. It was time for a fucking fairy tale. So I love this book. Again, it's not like, oh my god, so impressively written, but it's an easy read, and I'm reading it for the 3rd time in a week. Like, it's obviously just like a great book in its own right. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So, this is the last book that I'll mention, even though I've read another one since, but that was technically September, so I'm gonna leave it for next time. So the final book was Casey McQuiston's next book. So Red, White and Royal Blue was her debut novel, and this year, just 2 or 3 months ago in June, she released a book called One Last Stop, and this book is also queer, focusing on women identifying people. And so I will get into what this book is about, but I just want to say that something that I love about Casey, this author, is that they sprinkle different kinds of queer characters throughout her novels, these 2 novels. Like, there are trans characters in each of them, you know, bisexual, gay, like a range of the spectrum. And especially with like trans characters, I love that in either book, Casey didn't make a big deal about them being trans. It was just that they were. That's just like a side note that I enjoy that, and I think that needs to be in more literature. Okay, so in this book, One Last Stop, it is about a 23-year-old woman, gal, and she has quite a complex sort of background, upbringing, and she moves to New York. She's a student working in hospitality, is something very mysterious about this other woman that she meets. And I will say, it's very different to Red, White and Royal Blue, because there is a theme in it that there's something like otherworldly about this story. So yeah, kind of impossible things happening, you know. So I think in that sense, you know, it's very creative. I can respect this book and why people would love it. It is, you know, people do love it, but it's just not really my thing. It kind of reminds me of Addie LaRue. What is that book called? Addie LaRue. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So I read that last year, and that's also highly rated. People love it. I can see why. I really can understand why, but it's just not my thing. And I ended up giving this 3 stars. I wanted to give it 4 stars just purely for the like queer storyline, but I knew that wouldn't be honest to how I really felt about the book, because I didn't love it. I didn't really connect with Jane, or the other characters. I didn't really connect with any of the characters, like in Red, White and Royal Blue. Literally the reason I'm reading it for the 3rd time is because I love the characters so much. I just want to spend time with them. Like, I just want to be around them over and over. And I miss them when they're gone. And I don't feel that way about One Last Stop. And I don't want to compare these 2 novels, because of course they're completely different. And just because they're written by the same person, you can't expect them to create something recreate something that it's just not going to be. She wants to write something totally different, right? Which is awesome, and I love that people love it. I'd still recommend this book, but it's just not really my thing. It probably was a bit more of what I thought the Red, White and Royal Blue was going to be. I thought it was going to be a bit more like YA or something, but yeah, it is still a good book. It's just not my thing. So we are coming to the end now. I will leave that other book, which is another book that I have adored, another bit of queer fiction, and I'm also listening to another couple of books at the moment as well, which I reckon I'll probably give 5 stars to as well, unless they go downhill. But I've been reading a lot of really good books, so I'm very happy. And I'll bring out probably another ramble at some point this week, so please make sure you're subscribing. Please, it means the world if you can like and comment as well. Really, really helps me as a new creator. And I'm gonna go to bed now. I'm really tired, so I hope that you've enjoyed this, and please let me know if you have read any of these books, if you have any recommendations for me, or if you do end up reading any books, or you want to just, I'd love to start a conversation in the comments. So I